Can I buy a magic sword?
Ted, it's not that kind of campaign. You gotta earn that kind of treasure.
Alright, can I use the hard-earned cash to get a stat improvement or a feat?
Ted, this is not a video game. We don't just buy our way to the next level.
Alright, well what can I do with all this worthless gold then?
You could get a regular sword. You could buy a fancy bottle of wine. What about a fancy party dress? Make sure you show plenty of cleavage, Ted. Now that's gold well spent. Hey folks, Nerdarchist Dave here from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, hanging out with
Nerdarchist Ted.
Nerdarchy is a place for news, views, and homebrews for Dungeons & Dragons as well as other RPG games.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
Recently, we've been inspired by the release of Dragon Heist. As of the filming of this video, it is now available in D&D Beyond, as well as your local friendly flags. So with that, Dragon Heist is all about scoring 500,000 golden dragons. That's a lot of moolah.
In 5e D&D, money doesn't really have the same impact as it would in the wide world that we live in. And there's people who are constantly complaining about, well, what do I do with all this loot? So let's talk about it.
All right, you're right and you're wrong, because it absolutely does have the same impact in the game that it would in the world we live in. The difference is there's no game mechanics for it for the most part. Like our good friend Anthony Amato from Cardboard Fortress is like, what am I going to do with all this gold? It's worthless. I've seen that online many times. And the idea is if it doesn't offer a benefit on your character sheet, if you can't write +2 someplace, then it doesn't have any value to the game, right? And you might be right if we were just playing a game, but we're actually playing what's called a role-playing game. So you're trying to get into the role of this character, and why as a player, the money, you're right, the gold doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really make a difference. But for the character, it's a whole nother story.
If there are a couple characters that could benefit from gold, but only to a certain point. Those who invest in the ritual feat, or wizards who learn by putting spells into books. There's there. But with each of them, there is a finite number of available spells that could be put in the books, and after that, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of low impact, but there's plenty of people who play this game and really try and become the characters. And that's where things kind of change and have a whole lot more meaning. Also, there's an article over on D&D Beyond written by James Hick, and it's called What to Do with 500,000 Gold Pieces. And he kind of goes over different things that you could do. But, speaking of that article, which there's a link to down in the description, and D&D Beyond, we want to thank them for making this video possible. They're sponsors of Nerdarchy. We greatly appreciate them. You can help support us by supporting the sponsors. There will be a link to D&D Beyond down there. And if nothing else, hey, go check out the article. It's really well written. James Hake is a top-notch author.
And he gives a lot of, really cool things that you could do. And with that, there's other inspiring things that you could do should you have access to a ridiculous amount of money.
Now, earlier we mentioned, like, if you have the ritualist caster feat, gold becomes a lot more useful to you, because then, you can go and, well, one, you need to pay to put these rituals in your books, and you might be able to buy them from other ritual casters and have them put them in your book that way. Or if you're a wizard, it's the same thing, but for all of your spells.
Right.
So, for those two characters, the gold becomes a lot more important, and it does kind of affect your character sheet and how your character operates. But aside from that, there's some other things that you might want to think about.
Even in our home games, characters are doing something with their wealth because, let's face it, we are not playing characters that are so single-minded on adventuring. I really think that with the 5e model, they are taking things where you are making a character that is trying to exist in a world, and in so doing, like, you want to establish a foothold. So whether you want to start a business, or hire people to do different things for you. This gives you the groundwork, and you can slowly build that up until you have made a major impact upon the world. There's an entire set of board games out there called Legacy, where what you do when you play the game is affected the next time you play the game, which is really great. But that's the way RPGs really should be all the time. So, by making this staple upon your gaming world with what you do, I think is a fabulous idea.
Let's dissect our own games a little bit. I know you're running a game, I'm running a couple games where there are ongoing stories. For instance, in my game, after hard battles, the Scarlet Sisterhood adventure and party, they would want to go to a tavern and rent a bath, right? And they would want hot baths to be drawn for them. And the barbarian Agnetha, her whole thing is, oh, I'm so full of rage, I need a bath now. So they would go, they're spending money on these things, right? Money that doesn't mean anything in the game, but it was important to them as the players.
Absolutely.
But where that led to? They're like, this town needs a bathhouse. It doesn't have one. They saw a need, so they decided to fulfill it, and they went out and they had one built. So now they're also running a business based around money that they invested in, and they had this thing built, and now it becomes a source of revenue. Although, in game, we never really talk about it. It's more like an HQ, a headquarters that they use.
Right.
Yeah, it just becomes a part of the backdrop, and we're like, oh, we need to do something. We should go to the bathhouse and discuss it and plan it. Or we have a prisoner. Let's take them back to the bathhouse. I don't know. Villains are dirty. You got to clean them up. Another time, they were in the Feywild. They were in an Eladrin city, and they were invited to a big party or a ball, and they didn't have anything to wear. So what do? You go shopping and you buy fancy, you buy fancy party dresses. They did that. Also, one of them was the paladin. The paladin would summon Arun, her steed, and Arun's thing was he wanted baubles, he wanted jewels, he wanted to be pretty. So she basically bedazzled her mount, and he would get very upset if he didn't have everything in its proper place. And sometimes they would want him to do stuff, and she would have to bribe him with more baubles to put into his fur. So do these things do anything in the game? No, but it's fun. Later on, I actually had someone do a magical enchantment on her steed, so when he vanished, his bells and jewels wouldn't disappear or wouldn't fall to the ground anymore. They would stay on him, because that was one of the things too. When she dismissed Arun or he got killed, he left behind all of his bling, and then he'd come back and he wouldn't want to do anything until she put it all back on him. And it just created these fun role-playing instances in the game.
That's awesome stuff. I know, in the game that I run, you've got Ryan's character who, from the beginning, he's like, I'm a tailor. I'm using this for my, my own personal interests, but it also winds up becoming a place where, the thieving stuff that I can do has a safe place to talk. You've got Mark's character who winds up running a bounty hunter service, and it's something that, it's important, he checks in. There really hasn't been a whole lot of money earned from either of these things, but they become important facets within the characters. Nate's character from the get-go, he's the seventh son of a noble house, so he's like, I got no stake in the family's wealth. I need to go earn my own, so I'm going to be a merchant. So whenever he goes places, he's willing to spend money to try and make money and try to build up his name and his credibility. So these are great things that players are personally making the investments. In your game, my character is a cleric, and if you're playing the typical cleric, at least in my opinion, you should have on the scope of, I want to own a temple. This is what clerics do. You should really be I want to settle down at some point in time and preach this religion. Now, I started saving money so that I could buy a temple. In one of the books, it talks about being 50,000 gold. That's a lot of money to have happen. It's going to take time. Well, then the new book came out, some time ago, and it's
And you're thinking you just need to rob or find the 500,000 golden dragons, or I'll be problem solved. 10 temples.
Well, no, I was thinking about the spell mighty. There's like mighty fortress and temple where like wizard and cleric spells like
So I have the wrong book, is what
you
you're
have the
telling
wrong
me.
book, right? You cast these spells every day in the same spot for a year, and they become permanent structures. So it's like, holy crap! You gave us exactly a little over a year downtime. So I'm like, poof! I got a temple. All I needed was to have the land approved. I wasn't even charged for it. I was just like, well, there's extra space, so go for it. So it was like, now I have what I wanted, but the gold that I was saving for it needs to have an outlet. So the fact that I worship a god of knowledge and magic, I was like, well, what if I started a school? So here was an opportunity for me to say, well, I'm going to hire the teachers and I'm going to just pay and provide an education to the town. So I felt like I'm making a impact upon Gryffindor because now there's the precedence of free education. And being a high level adventurer, the cost to pay someone to teach young children is nowhere near what like I could bring in. So at any point in time, I'm like, okay, well, I'll put another 5 or 10,000 gold in the coffers, and it'll pay teachers for whatever. I could get to another point where I'm like, all right, this thing is now running. I've got the gold to run it for 10 years. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do another one in this next city and do the same thing.
Yeah, so it impacts the campaign world. It impacts the stories that are being told. In Gryffindor, you've built a temple. They built a bathhouse. The dwarves had a garrison there where they would loan soldiers to the town to Gryffindor, and my dwarf had the garrison rebuilt and moved to the wall, so that they could better be able to help protect the city. Also, he incorporated a blacksmithy shop as well in order to do his blacksmithing. So all these things cost gold, and again, they don't do anything to our character sheets. They're just fun role playing things. One of the other things that my character do whenever he would return home, he would buy a cask of the Black Iron Special Brew, and it was always just like something I would use. Like, oh, I meet a new NPC and I want to impress them or be friends with them. I'd be like, here, let's share a mug of this, and we can be buds. And in your game, I also I was courting a wife and got married, so I had to do things to make that happen. So there's all these things, and they just build. And another area, you actually brought this up when we were discussing this idea for a video, is there's two things that kind of are gaming. They're not mechanics per se, but they are part of the game. Wealth can open up access and options for the player characters.
If you play a variety of different video games, like you can unlock some kind of achievement, whether you've talked to the right NPC, whether you've acquired enough wealth to bribe somebody, but you can get into new areas of the town by either having enough wealth or making it look like you have enough wealth to get into a more noble section.
To get acceptance.
Yeah. In the Critical Role campaign 2, early on, they're trying to get into the Tri-Spire. They're trying to get into this, really nice section of town, and like the characters are just not dressed enough to look like someone who belongs there. Jester's got some nobility to her, and she was able to get in, but Caleb, who looks like a schlub,
a bum. He looks like a hobo.
Like they're like, no, you can get out of here. And like even magic didn't work. Like it dispelled his disguise self spell. So it was like, oh, I'm sorry for bothering you. Sorry for wasting your time. I'm just gonna go over here.
We're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way and take a bath.
So like, if you really wanted to treat your games, in some of that video game-esque way, you could literally have, perhaps early on in the game, you give them the goal of getting in touch with some of these political parties, some of these high and noble, but until they have enough wealth to really flout their wealth, they don't have what it takes to really impress the people and be able to get there and having the conversations be meaningful. So you can literally just spend money on, as you were saying, baubles, fancy clothes, just to look your best, so that when you meet the right people, you can do that. And in fact, in my game, that's something that Kurt does. Like, he found out about, that there was this Fae tailor in town who was sewing magic into it, and really it just stayed clean and, could occasionally change colors or what have you. But that was important to his character, and he was willing to shell out thousands of gold just to look the best.
Interesting point there. It became something that the player kind of started obsessing over, but at the same time it became a foil for Ryan's character, because he was also a tailor, and then it started this like back and forth banter and a little bit of a rivalry between the two characters, because the one wasn't shopping with Ryan's character, but with this other person who he considered a rival.
And that was the primarily reason that I put it in the game, was to create, this foil and be able to, spoiler, try to offer that as a thing, should, Ryan's character so desire. And he didn't really, take a lot of hint of, well, what can I do? So I put it in there as, well, you've got an organization, so the organization was looking out for you, and it's like, well, here's this book. And it wound up being another storyline attached to it, so I thought it was cool.
Yeah, so there's all kinds of things you can do with that. Like we said, it opens up access, almost like a video game, but a little bit more organic. And, the PHB has different lifestyles, so different costs for daily costs for depending on what kind of lifestyle you're living. And look, I guarantee if you have characters living at that wealthy lifestyle for long enough, people will notice. Definitely people below them will notice, and then you might start garnering the notice of people above you, as well as local thieves guilds, assassin guilds, merchants, and other people that will be like, oh, this person is wealthy, they have something to offer. Maybe I should get in good with them. Maybe I should try and get what they have. It could just be more story elements, more plot hooks, more things to add to your game.
And you can work with your GM to say, what it is that you're doing to show that kind of lifestyle. Did you move into a fancier section of town? Did you fix up a section of town and now you're making the area you're in, better? Is this an up and coming place? Did you buy all new garb and, do feasts? These kind of events, these kind of things, going back to what I was saying, have the ability to affect the place that your character is living and residing in, so much so that it'll affect session to session, possibly campaign to campaign.
Yeah, I mean, if you as the player can set aside your perspective to instead look at things through the perspective of your character, right, you're going to have a lot more fun with this. You know what the mechanical benefit to your wealth and your gold is going to be? It's going to be fun. It's going to be more fun at the table, more investment in the campaign, in the world. If you pretend it is real money and you are really receiving the things that you're buying, then I think it's going to have a lot more value and benefit. We've even done a series of videos. We have a small playlist called "What to Spend Your Loot On." I'll put a link in the description as well, along with the article over on D&D Beyond and D&D Beyond itself, so you guys can check those out. But there is definitely ways you can enrich your role-playing experience in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons through accumulating wealth and gold, and then having fun using it in your games.
So let us know what you think about this. How are you spending your loot in your game? You got any awesome stories that you want to share with the other watchers, listeners out there? It's a great place to do that, down in the comments below. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget to head down to the description where you can find those links to D&D Beyond, that article, as well as the playlist.
So until next time, stay nerdy.